Hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm excited about the topic, cybersecurity. Our guest speaker today is Sarah Rosen. I have listened to her present a couple of times, and I've been blown away at the information. And she will, I'm sure, blow you away. It's a topic that's really been on everybody's mind. We get a lot of questions about security, cybersecurity, especially from our end of things, but also how do you protect yourself in your personal life and your personal finances? And that's what Sarah's going to address today. And I think that it's going to be something that will open everybody's eyes. She'll give you some practical ways to go about actually met a couple more people, go about taking some steps to protect yourself. Good to see all of you. Dave, John, D, how are you? This has been by far the most attended webinar that we've done. So no pressure, Sarah. Everybody's here to see you.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Does that mean we're interested in cybersecurity, which 12, 24 months ago would have been the case a little less so? Maybe still
Yeah,
interested.
I think you're right. I think we can't wake up another day and not hear of a story that somebody's been hacked, somebody's lost money due to something, and they don't end that up well. So this is much needed and very timely. So I'm excited.
Well, hopefully I can provide. So my name is Sarah Rosen. I am the managing director of private client services here at BlackCloak, and BlackCloak provides digital protection and cybersecurity for families and family offices in their personal lives. So as you think about, many of you may work for a corporation, and that corporation is protecting your computer or a phone if they've handed it to you. But there isn't a lot of protection in our personal lives. And so I wanted to accomplish a couple things today. First and foremost, I want to demystify cybercrime.
I'm going to make you the host right now so that we can see what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so some pictures too.
Awesome.
On an Adam. And should I keep adminning on my side? Is that something?
Okay. You should be. There we go.
Good.
Yep.
Not that. Not share. Blind show. There we go. Good.
Perfect.
All right. Okay. Okay. First, I want to demystify cybercrime. I think because cybersecurity has existed within the realms of cybersecurity teams, there's not yet a common language to understand what it is. And all of you are concerned about it, rightfully so. But understanding what it is, I think, helps break down what you need in the form of a solution, whether it's small or large. So my main goal here is education. I think there's a slide about BlackCloak somewhere, but know that BlackCloak does provide personal cybersecurity, and I'll explain what that is here at the end. But really, I want to give you non-BlackCloak specific tips, just tips and tricks that you can do today, tomorrow, independent of BlackCloak, ideally during this session. So what is the threat landscape individual families face today? So it is probably not surprising. There has been a bit of a evolution of cybercrime, right? And first and foremost, let me define what cybercrime is. So basically what is happening is there's a bunch of bad guys. And these bad guys, they are in the information business, believe it or not. So they are collecting information about us. And a lot of it is seemingly innocuous. It could be on social media sites. It can be on Reddit from a third party. It can be on data brokers, which I'll explain what a data broker is. It can be on the dark web, right? This sort of scary underbelly that we hear about. But that seemingly innocuous information is the tools of the trade for hackers. What they're doing is they're taking that information and they're using it to trick you. So we call it cybersecurity, we call it cybercrime. It's really just age-old con. It's a con. All of it is a con. And if they have enough information to trick you, then they get access to your critical information, usually related to finance, potentially to sometimes they're trying to mess with reputation as well. Sometimes it's nation state, but that's a little bit different. We'll kind of stick with reputational damage and financial damage for today, so that they can do damage. So it all sort of starts with this data and the reduction of data. But what I think is super important to know is there isn't some sort of secret, well, they do have tools that we don't have. There's no some secret thing happening in the background. They are simply stealing data about you. If I have enough data information about Dave, can I convince him that I'm his banker, his broker, his painter, whatever the creative crime might be, right? Do I have enough information to trick Dave, right? It's a trick. And so hopefully that makes it feel a little bit more manageable, because now what we're trying to do is we're trying to protect that information and that data, and we're trying to protect it in a variety of different ways. But the reason BlackCloak exists is really sort of the evolution of the bad guy. I call the bad guy, we assume a hacker is a bad guy, but historically bad guys broke into companies, right? I'm a bad guy. I would like to digitally break into Home Depot and steal something of value. Usually that would be email addresses and names, right? Personal information, because I can go use that personal information and I can use it elsewhere, right? If I get Heather's credentials that she uses on her Gmail account and I put them into her, I'm going to guess, US bank account, right? Will they work? Sometimes they will. And so that is sort of the like natural evolution of what was originally happening. But it got really, really hard to break into Home Depot because they got smart and they hired thousands of cybersecurity people and they have cybersecurity tools. It is like Fort Knox. What isn't so hard potentially is to break into the Wi-Fi, personal Wi-Fi of the CEO of Home Depot at their home, thereby potentially not only doing havoc for that individual and that family, but potentially making their way back into Home Depot in sort of a Trojan horse fashion. And BlackCloak was really founded to solve that particular problem, right? Threat actors, bad guys, they started to recognize what we all have recognized. It's a lot easier to break into the Wi-Fi than it is to break into Home Depot. And they also sort of this influx of data breaches that we started to see in 2022. The first thing in 2021, sorry, in 2022, we started to see doxing and swatting. It's not something when I joined BlackCloak, I didn't think swatting was a real thing. I thought it was something on TV for like CSI shows. It happens all of the time and it is really concerning and disruptive to a family. The evolution, we started to see personal lives are being targeted, right? Let's target the personal lives of the C-suite. And we saw sort of the biggest example of that in 2024 with the murder of the UHC CEO in December. And that started to the conversion of sort of cyber and physical, right? I'm not sure of the latest information they have, but he was walking around. Somebody probably had access to his calendar. I'm guessing, I have no insider information, right? If they have access to their calendar, they have a pretty good idea of when he's going to be walking from point A to point B. So we're starting to see digital and physical. So that's really the background, but I think it's important to know a couple of things when you're thinking about this. And one is that it is pervasive, meaning most of these stats are for individuals who join the BlackCloak membership. By way of scale, we have many thousands of families who are members of BlackCloak. So if we look across all families, as we welcome them into the membership, 7 in 10 of them are going to have an exposed password online. That's probably not surprising. I think that's low. I would say 9 out of 10 of them have an exposed password online, but 1 in 4 already have malware on one of their devices. They bring us their devices, they onboard onto BlackCloak, we find malware 1 in 4 times. That's a little probably more concerning. I think we're all concerned about it, but it's sort of a not us. Most families we work with, we say 1 in 5, again, this feels low to me, have a smart home. So just one IoT device, a smart crackpot, a smart fridge, whatever it is, even just Netflix considers you as a smart home. And that's important when we start to think about access and data that happens in the home. And then for those of you who are working with or familiar with family offices in particular as a firm, the family certainly, but the firm itself are really big targets. It's a small firm with access to a lot of capital with not a lot of cybersecurity oversight, most likely, is what the bad guys are guessing. And when I say bad guy, I also think it's important to distinguish between your standard average bad guy and what I call your Ocean's 11 bad guy. So we're all probably getting texts that are from, or supposedly from, the highway patrol that we owe $200 and send your money, right? And we all sort of have gotten those weird emails that look a little bit off. Now, I want to make a distinction between your sort of standard long tail bad guy, right? He's targeting people like me, people where if I were to not be vigilant, he might get $100 best case scenario, right? And that bad guy is sending out a mediocrely well thought out trick to thousands and thousands of people and hoping 2, 3, 10 of them sort of fall into the trick. That is not what we're concerned about. BlackCloak does prevent those guys from getting to you as well. We're concerned about the bad guy who is targeting an individual or your family very specifically, and they realize the resources or assets that might be available, and therefore they're willing to invest a lot of time and resource into gathering information to create a trick for the family. What do I mean by a lot of time and resources? It's pretty common that we every week we'll have somebody will come to us. They're in some state of incident that they need help with, and we discovered that somebody has been sitting in their email for months, if not a year, just studying the mark, just studying their mark. And obviously, once they're in the email, they can redirect things. But I think more importantly, the level of precision they can get to once they're in your email is astounding, right? They realize that Joel never puts thank you. He only puts thanks at the bottom of the email. I say this just to say that it is indistinguishable. If in fact you fall into the crosshairs of one of these Ocean's 11 hackers, right? When they pull off the heist, you will not see it coming. You should look for every possible sign leading up to it and be highly suspicious, because they will have so much time to execute it. And I think a common story that sort of rings true is probably one of the more jarring that I've heard here at BlackCloak is we had a family. They weren't clients at BlackCloak. They were on a work/vacation. It was a 2-week trip. They were in the Middle East, I believe Dubai. Don't quote me on that. And he had brought both his work computer and his personal computer. They're staying at a very, very nice hotel. They flew over, 2-week holiday, so a little bit of work thrown in, got back on the flight. I think it's a 17-hour flight back to LAX from Dubai. And when they landed, every single digital online password they had been changed. So forget about finances, right? Which luckily actually is guarded by their financial advisor. The finances, the direct financial accounts were hit. But imagine your like Excel energy bill, like every password. And that's an instance where not only were they sitting in their email and studying them as a mark, but they also had access to their calendar. So they knew they were about to get on a 17-hour flight. So they had waited, sort of sat and wait for the perfect opportunity to pull off this heist, if you will. So how did these attacks begin? Hopefully everybody is answering. It starts with data. The best analogy I have heard, and I definitely didn't originate this, but it springs so true in our world, is if you have a car thief show up to the airport, that car thief is stealing a car. That is what they are here to do. And it's just a question of which car are they going to steal. Are they going to steal the one with the windows down and the keys in the ignition, i.e. lots of data on the internet? Or are they going to steal the one with like the club across the steering wheel and like a blinking light, right? They're obviously going to start with the low-hanging fruit. And by having a lot of seemingly innocuous information online, that makes you low-hanging fruit in addition to anything that would make you stand out to a bad guy. One of the more obvious is if you have a liquidity event, if you sell a business, if you're preparing to sell a business, it is very hard to keep that out of the news. And a lot of juicy information that bad guys like are going to be exposed. And oftentimes people are moving from one type of lifestyle to another type of lifestyle. It's a pretty big transition, and it's a huge target for these bad guys. It's just kind of thinking through that it's not just sort of uber wealthy or ultra wealthy. They are very targeted in who they're selecting, and they're sort of picking their targets and running with it. And it all starts with the data. So what can you do about it? A little bit of background. So I mentioned seemingly innocuous information. Data brokers, if you're not familiar with them, you actually are. If you've ever Googled somebody's telephone number and you get 411.com or any yellowpages.com, something where you pay $1.99 to get their telephone number or their address, that is a data broker. And there's about 400 to 600 of these types of companies. If you pay that $1.99, there is a massive amount of information that you can purchase about an individual. It's not just their telephone name and their old addresses. If you think about all of the data that's been sucked up over the years and bought and sold, like it is like a portfolio of information on an individual, all for $1.99. So back to the bad guy scenario, if they're targeting you, Heather, as an individual, I can buy Heather's information for data brokers. So data brokers are about 400 to 600 of these guys. It's kind of a dodgy business in a way. It's not legal in Europe. That's kind of what the GDPR is all about, privacy and otherwise. But currently it's legal in the US, and they do have to take your information down, but they get to make up their own rules. So one might say you have to ask us in January and we'll take it down for 2 months. Another might say you ask us at the beginning of the month and we'll take it down for 3 weeks. Like, it's all over the place. And so we highly recommend you minimize your digital footprint, a large piece of which is data brokers. And there's firms out there, BlackCloak being one of them, that can help you reduce your presence on data broker sites. It's a pretty common sort of service that's provided. This is the one I do not recommend you go it alone. I don't think there is a great way of doing it alone. Dark web. So the dark web is another avenue through which to get information. You should know what information exists about you on the dark web. There's a site called You've Been Pwned. That's owned with a P, pwned. And you can Google it. It is a safe site. You can go there and find out sort of what breaches you've been involved with comprehensively. But knowing what information is being bought and sold about you is really important, taking your first step in putting some remedies in place. Everybody should have their credit frozen, and the NPD breach here at the bottom. So this was last summer, 2024. It got news in the cybersecurity world. I don't know if it got news outside the cybersecurity world, but there was a major breach at the National Public Data. And this is the background check company, basically, for the government. They have all of our information. Long story short, all of our Social Security numbers were stolen last summer, and it hasn't been widely reported. So everybody should assume your Social Security number is for sale on the dark web, and you should have your credit frozen. I was ahead of myself with the deep web and dark web. So dark web, this is the underbelly. This is where guns and all sorts of stuff are sold. I myself have never actually seen it. I imagine it's a dark screen. Now, we have tens of people. We have a concierge team of over 50 people. They're all cybersecurity experts. They all know how to navigate the dark web. But BlackCloak, on behalf of our clients, we participate in the forums. So we're sort of lurking in there with the bad guys to see what is being bought and sold, to compare it to our client list so that we can catch if there's an instance of a new piece of information is bought and sold. We can notify you. Now, this other piece of information is being bought and sold about you. But knowing what is on the dark web is sort of your primary task in that realm, and then taking the necessary steps to remedy it. Breached passwords. So everybody has that like security password, that one that you just use and you have been using forever. And it's just Nike.com, and you only go to Nike.com once a year, right? And know that it is extremely easy for these guys to take a root password, Fuzzy Bunny, let's say. If my password's Fuzzy Bunny and I use Fuzzy Bunny 123, Fuzzy Bunny 1234, and Fuzzy Bunny 123 is for sale on the dark web, like, forget about it, right? They have cracked into all of my accounts if I'm using that particular email or some version of it. That being said, when you think through sort of immediate actions, there's really only 4 types of sites. We have 3, but I'm going to add one that are listed here that you really need to have a super encrypted password for. It's your email. If you do nothing else, get a super encrypted password and multi-factor authentication for your email. If somebody gets into your email, it is the data gold mine, right? And if you're using a common password, which we all kind of are, because who logs into their email? You just leave it open on your computer, right? I couldn't tell you what my password is off the top of my head for my email because I use it so often, and it's such a juicy target. So email's number 1. Finance is number 2. Chances are pretty good your wealth advisor, you've got a few measures in place for finance, but I would be remiss not to mention it. Social media sites, make sure they have strong passwords. And the 4th is your healthcare. That's where we see a lot of reputational damage data coming from. So any sort of healthcare related sites you want to put into that. So that tends to be about 12 to 13 total sites that you absolutely must have a secure password for. Who cares about Nike.com? Like, hooray if they get into it. I think we see a lot of people who have 90, 100 accounts. If you pull it up like on Google, on your Google, if you use Google, you don't have to change all 90. You will be leaps and bounds ahead if you just do these sort of 4 types of sites, 12 to 13 sites. So Circle of trust, I'll sort of go quickly over this. As you think about sort of the sophisticated Ocean's 11 hacker, um, the rules of the game change a little bit too. And you use the example of the athlete. So, Dave, when we're dealing with athletes, usually we're providing protection, cybersecurity and digital protection to the athlete themselves and their household, but also just sort of their surrounding posse. Because that's a great example where a lot of times they have friends who become, agents or whatever it is. But you have to think about, particularly if you think you might be a juicy target, who is that circle of trust that somebody might try and access you. Real estate agents often fall into this, right? Real estate agents are small businesses. It's kind of easy potentially to break into their email, right? If you are working with a real estate agent and you're doing a large financial transaction and their email is compromised, you can kind of play it out along the line. But sort of understanding that circle of trust, I think, is important. And we'll talk a little bit about Wi-Fi here, but I think that's a good one with the kids. I guess we'll get to it later with the kids, keeping kids sort of isolated from a digital perspective, but we'll get there in a moment. So fraud, as I mentioned, collecting all the data in order to trick you. This is where the tricks come in. We've got social engineering. We've got confidence scams. I would claim all of these, for the most part, are confidence scams. I'll share two with you that were particularly shocking to me for a couple of different reasons. One was last Christmas, last holiday season, and Heather and I are currently drafting information for this holiday season. We don't know what the scam is going to be yet, but there's going to be one. They come up with one every year. People's guards are down, their hearts are open, they're traveling. Like, this is Gamma-palooza time for sure. But last year, the reason I bring this up is because I 100% would have fallen for this if I didn't know it. The scam was that the bad guys would send you something, a physical item, something around $20, like a Yeti mug, something that you would probably expect to get from like your lawyer or your, attorney or your accountant as a holiday gift, right? Something that doesn't raise suspicions. In the package, there'll be a QR code. The QR code says, scan here to find out who sent you this mug. 100% I'm scanning here. 100%. There's no doubt. I 100% without a thought would scan on that QR code to find out who sent me the mug. Guess what? It has malware on it. So the QR code puts malware onto your phone, and now you've sort of just been caught. And I mentioned that only to be hyper vigilant during. As soon as I know what the scam is for the year, I will let Joel know. He will let you guys know. We don't know what this year's scam is. That was last year's scam. The other, because it's so simple, this happened last fall. Remember those old emails sort of at the beginning of cybercrime that said, like, we turned on your computer and we've been watching you, and now we're going to show everybody what you've been doing, when you think nobody's looking. It's kind of old and tired. Last year, they had the bad guys sent it out again, but this time they just took a Google screenshot of people's addresses and they digitized it. Sometimes it would be your neighbor. You were lucky if it was your neighbor. And they just added a sentence that said, or I can stop by and we can talk about it in person. People freaked out. Like, they were so upset. BlackCloak was getting so many calls. And this is just an age-old, we all know that's a scam, but how terrifying that somebody's going to show up your house and want to talk about, what you were doing on your camera when you didn't even know you were doing it on your camera, type of thing. And so that brings up 2 points. One, be suspicious always. But 2, you also can do home blurring. That's another recommendation. You can do it through Google Maps. BlackCloak does it on behalf of our clients, but they make you jump through a few hoops, but we recommend it's worth the time and effort to blur your home on Google Maps. Just sort of blocking out all of the potential ways that these bad guys can sort of infiltrate. And they really infiltrate in 4 areas. And so this is kind of how we're going to structure our plan on what you guys need to do to stay protected. So the first is accounts. We've talked a bit about accounts, but fundamentally it's those 12 accounts. The second is home, devices, and human. So we talked about the accounts, multi-factor authentication. If you have a Google phone, an Apple phone, you can put multi-factor authentication on every app, which I've done, certainly on my work-related apps and email apps, meaning every time you open it, it scans your face. I highly recommend that. Again, it's that email that we're really trying to protect. Okay, let's talk a little bit about home networks. And a lot of people have questions as it relates to AI and IoT. Home networks. So your Wi-Fi, your home network, is offers you Wi-Fi, and it is protected through a router. And you're probably loosely aware of that because when you got it from the telephone company, they said, we're going to send you the router. But what a router basically is, I'm going to equate it to my home. And my home has doors and windows. And there's very logical reasons I open the doors and the windows at my home. I open the doors to bring in groceries. I open the windows on a nice spring day. Anybody who's walking by, no suspicion is raised. No, it's a nice day. However, I were to go on vacation in the middle of December and leave my front door open, my neighbors would probably notice, right? They'd be like, something is out of sorts here. Your router is similar. It has ports, and there's very logical reasons that your ports should be open or closed. And then there's very suspicious reasons that your ports would be open in the formation of those ports. And so setting up that router in a secure way is something that you do need a semi-professional to do. I couldn't even guide you through that, right? There's articles we can look online. But I think the important detail to note is that IoT devices, smart fridge, we heard of a smart piano in one case, which I'm not even sure what that is, but they can change the router settings inadvertently. So even if you do set up your Wi-Fi in a way that is secure, and you are sure of that, it is possible that the next time you plug in some device, probably IoT, that they could become insecure. Your front door could fly open, your proverbial front door could fly open in the middle of December. So a couple of things to help avoid that. One big one, which is relatively simple, is to set up a guest network. It seems simple, but let me build a case for it. So you can think about the Wi-Fi sort of like, well, Thanksgiving is coming up, right? Thanksgiving dinner. If grandma comes to Thanksgiving with the flu, I just got over COVID, still a thing apparently, and everybody's getting the flu, right? And we want to think about the Wi-Fi in the same way. And so we want to take your standard network and we want to rename it. If it's named anything that indicates your family in any way, shape, or form, or your home, we recommend animal, color that mismatch. Purple, giraffe. Yellow, rhinoceros. So that it's completely indistinguishable from other Wi-Fis if somebody is in fact targeting you specifically. Then we recommend you set up a guest Wi-Fi. I think every carrier allows us except Xfinity. Xfinity might force you to take extra steps for a guest Wi-Fi, but predominantly you should be able to set up a guest Wi-Fi. Do not name it guest Wi-Fi. Name it purple, giraffe, fast. That's a little bit of marketing and advertising. People don't like guest networks. They think they're not as good. And put all of the home devices on the primary network and everything else goes on the guest network. The kids' gaming systems, every person that walks into the house. The guest network is what you should be using primarily. And that just keeps a separation, between if grandma were to come into the house with the flu, at least we've got a big wall between them, right? All of the devices that are kicking off seemingly innocuous information that a bad guy would love. Think about those, your Roomba, if you still use those electric vacuums. That gives a perfectly detailed floor plan of your house if somebody were to access it digitally, right? And just sort of when you start to unravel it, there's so much data and information being generated in the house that a bad guy could put to very, very good use. Now, BlackCloak, we scan our clients' Wi-Fi through the public IP address on a weekly basis. And we find in that 52-week cycle, so every Wi-Fi, some clients have 4, right? A boat, a house, a second home, whatever it is. Across all of the Wi-Fis that we're scanning, 1 in 4 will switch from secure to insecure at some point in that 52-week cycle. So that is why we're doing it so frequently, because it is very common that falls out of. But if you start with the guest Wi-Fi, you're off to a good start. That is a good secure step. Devices. So the best thing is anti-malware. We've all heard of anti-malware, but I want to tell you about the difference between anti-malware at the consumer grade and business grade. And there's nothing in between currently. For those of you who are interested in investing, I imagine something is going to come in the middle here at some point in the near future. But consumer grade, you can think of consumer grade anti-malware. I don't want to name a brand, but the ones that have been familiar with us for a while Here's how they work. They look at past instances and they spot patterns. So an example would be if there is a man on a ladder in front of my house at 2 a.m. in a black hoodie jiggling the window, that's probably a robber, right? They'll be able to distinguish. We know this pattern. We're going to call that is probably a robber and let Sarah know. That's consumer grade malware. It's good. It's way better than nothing. You're 60% of the way there if you're just using consumer grade anti-malware. There's something called business grade. It's actually called an EDR, Endpoint Detection and Response is the name of the technology. And the difference here is that the bad guys know about anti-malware, right? And so what they're going to do is they're still going to put the ladder. They're still going to get on it at 2 a.m. They're still going to jiggle my window. They're just going to put on a yellow hoodie instead of a black hoodie because they know that the AI won't pick that up. And so consumer grade, what every corporation uses, what you have on your work computer, it is using AI to be more predictive and anticipate things like the yellow hoodie versus the black hoodie. And it does require a team of 12 to manage it 24/7, right? It's absolutely not great for consumer at the moment. BlackCloak offers it to our clients. And we have a security operations team. There's sort of ways around it, but just knowing the difference between these sort of two, I think is helpful. Another thing I found with anti-malware. So bad guys use SEO. If you're not familiar with SEO, it's search engine optimization. It's what marketers use. And, I am a middle-aged woman. And so I'm getting fed a lot of search results, based on what they know about me. I think we're all familiar with it. Bad guys buy it too. And what they're buying is they're buying 1-800 numbers, or I'm saying what they're selling. They're advertising as 1-800 numbers. So for instance, if Apple calls you and says, hey, we're Apple, and you believe them because Apple's good and we're going to help you fix your computer, and you didn't even know your computer was broken, and you say, oh, gee whiz, this sounds weird. I'm going to hang up and call you back, Apple. And they say, okay. And then you Google Apple Healthcare or Apple Health. They have most likely purchased the first ad that comes up. So you really want to be really discerning when you're Googling numbers in that scenario. You want to be extremely discerning on which one you pick and make sure it's part of the company, right? They can't mess with HP.com, right? So if it's HP.com, you can feel good about it, but look really closely at the numbers because they have, in fact, closed that loop, which is concerning. Okay. So we've got the accounts section, right? We want to lock down our accounts. We want to lock down our Wi-Fi. We want to make sure our devices are as secure as they can possibly be. And potentially the hardest part is hardening the human and knowing where these scams are coming from. I have a couple of little tips and tricks I can recommend. The first, and this one we tend to share with older folks who don't want to know about technology but are concerned, folks who have parents who might not be interested in engaging in technology but are still concerned. And it has to do with psychology. So every single one of us, as humans, when we are put in a stressful situation, we make less good decisions. Which better way to say that? We'll go with less good decisions. And so bad guys deliberately put us into those scenarios. And so if you get any form of communication, if it's an email, if it's a snail mail, if it's, from a parachute, whatever it is, and your first reaction is immediately your blood pressure rises. We didn't pay the IRS, whatever it might be. The first thing you should think is this a scam? Because they are very deliberately putting you into a psychological state to move quickly, take action urgently, and not think too much. And you don't want to be in that state, even if there really is a kidnap situation, which is very, 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 very rare, right? So that's sort of tip number one. The other, and this is, I guess, Google specific. I'm sure there's other ways, but I use Google alerts. And if you set up a Google alert, which if you go into Google and say, how do I set up a Google alert? And I do it daily because I am keeping a large number of people informed. You can do it weekly. And you set up an alert for high net worth or HNWI, scams, cybersecurity. You will get 1 to 2 articles a week and you will skim them. It will take 1 minute. And every 3 weeks, there'll be something noteworthy that you want to read that the headline sort of draws you in. And you're setting up your own sort of feedback loop as it relates to, and this is sort of isolating those Ocean 11 hackers. As you can imagine, they're not reported. Who's reporting this, right? There's some are reported to the FBI, but most aren't, and a lot of it's not making it into the news. And so there's these sort of small areas where we're getting this information from that do make it into the news. And that gives you a good idea of sort of scams of the future. So with that, let me show you very briefly. BlackCloak does presumably, or I assure you they do, but you can presume everything I've sort of talked about. So BlackCloak is a membership. Households join for a year or more. And we are reducing your data broker footprint constantly, every day, ongoing. We are educating our clients on what's on the dark web. We have an ID verification tool. So if you are working with that real estate agent and you're not sure about that real estate agent's email hygiene, right? We have a tool you can use to confirm identity. I mentioned home blurring. We also have an app, so you can, a VPN to make sure it's in our app, to make sure your data isn't getting back onto the internet inadvertently. We do offer that enterprise-grade device protection. It's, again, called an EDR, endpoint detection and response. We have a 12-person security operations center that is manning both that back end of the tool. And what that allows us to do is quarantine. So let's say they do trick Heather, and Heather does click on the download button for the malware she should click on. Presumably with the EDR in place, we can identify it and quarantine it. We'll call Heather, if she's a client, and say, Heather, what are you doing? She'll say, I'm on the phone with Apple. And we'll say, no, you're not. Hang up the telephone. We've got a chat scenario. Device hardening. So if you've looked at your mobile devices recently, in the security settings, requires a PhD, and it is totally unclear when you turn on, toggle on and toggle off, what data are you giving up, aren't you giving up? We'll go through device by device with our clients so that they're set up. We do vulnerability scan. And then maybe most interestingly, we have a team of 50, concierge team of 50 individuals, all cybersecurity experts. Everything I've mentioned is sort of the cloak that we're going to put in place to protect. And then our concierge teams allows us to be really customized to a family. Is it a multi-generational family? Are there teenagers, right? There's a lot of sort of different angles that we want to educate, address, provide coverage in different ways based on how that family is set up. And so I offer this. We would love, if you're interested in BlackCloak, don't get me wrong, but I really offer this kind of as this conversation tends to elevate people's anxiety naturally. And there are solutions, and BlackCloak is one of the first. I am sure there'll be more. I anticipate 10 years from now, we'll all have personal cybersecurity, the way we all have home insurance in a similar way. And not necessarily that'll be insurance, but it'll be one of those things that, of course, you put in place as a responsible adult. The market isn't there yet, so it's a little bit piecemeal, and you certainly can find pieces of what BlackCloak does if that's what you're looking for. Oh, we've won a lot of awards. We're really good at what we do. And they get mad when I don't say that.
Can you give that address again? It was the one that you can kind of scan for the articles to just pay attention to every couple of weeks.
Sure. So you're going to set up a Google alert. If you go to Google and Google Alerts, it'll bring you to the page to set up a Google alert. You get to pick if you want a daily, weekly digest. There's a few choices. But the search term I use that I find pretty effective is high net worth individual. Mine just says HNWI. So, you can use that. Scam, cybercrime, and or cybersecurity. And I tend to get about 2 a day if I get any. There's definitely days that search doesn't bring up anything. How much?
Can you talk about costs? How much BlackCloak cost? Before we get there, I had a question that kind of fits into this one. So it seems to me there's a twofold distinction in what you guys kind of attack. And number one would be somebody had an event, their hair is on fire, and they need help right now, right? Secondly, then would be the prevention side of that. So in the context of that, can you talk about those two things maybe?
Sure. We do not charge differently. It's kind of crazy. It's a screaming good deal if you're hacked and you need help. That being said, it's very unpleasant, and I don't recommend that of anybody. But the only good news in that is that BlackCloak is here for you and has your knowledge. So BlackCloak, if you just look at we have 3 tiers. The lowest tier is really meant for that circle of trust that we talked about. So family, office, staff. people who would be targeted because they are affiliated with another. And then on the high end, we've got sort of our full protective coverage, which is sort of required if you're also high profile, in my opinion. If you're high profile on the internet, I'm going to recommend our principal. But they range between 6,500 and 10,000 MSRP per year per household. And we make a few assumptions about households. There's probably 2 adults. There's multiple homes or Wi-Fi's or boats or planes. There's probably some dependents if dependents are fully included in this. So it's very much, we want to protect the whole household as sort of a unit. And we assume so in the membership. And then you decide if you want to renew at the end of the year.
Okay. And then you mentioned, so I think this is a form of insurance, in my opinion, right? In our not necessarily as the technically insurance, but it's protection against risk is basically what we're talking about here. On the property casualty side, you may not know the answer to this. That's fine. Is there anything added into property and casualty that is somewhat protective, or is that just totally something like cyber attack or anything like that that you know of that would be helpful to add into a policy like that, in addition to what BlackCloak does?
I most definitely should not speak on that because I do not, but I will offer you two other nuggets that might be helpful. One is if you do have cybersecurity insurance, be aware that most of them, the language is set up in a way that if you participate in any way, you aren't qualified to be covered. And if somebody tricks you into giving them a piece of information they use in a crime, that's considered participating in any way. So that's an important detail, I think, overall. And I'll also tell you that we do work with a number of insurance companies, and all of them are interested in quantifying the amount of risk we're able to reduce so that they can apply it in some way, shape, or form to a discount or otherwise on insurance for people who use BlackCloak. But that hasn't actually been realized yet. So I think the idea is there, Joel, and the insurance companies are sort of, working on the math that they need to do so. But that could be something that'll be available in the future.
And that makes sense. We're working off when we're thinking about risk and different things and what could potentially take our money. I think we're working off 40-year-old models, right? And I mean, the old risks don't really apply here. You're talking about the way that people are attacking our clients and our businesses today, which is totally different than the way they attacked them 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. So we have to think differently. And I think BlackCloak fits right into that. I think it's a perfect fit. And again, it's up to everyone to make their own decision. But if you can, for a small percentage of your funds, protect your entire kingdom, it's at least worth a conversation, in my opinion.
So we have a monthly update that is sort of newsworthy, what you should know. We also have episodic sort of outreach to our clients when there's an event. So if Apple has a major update, and it's really important you update your Apple devices immediately, that might be a periodic event. We also have an app on people's phones so we can notify them that way. But we are constantly trying to educate in addition to sort of notify an event that requires action. We work specifically with high net worth, high profile individuals. And so we are not expecting our clients' cyber hygiene to change. We are protecting them despite their cyber hygiene. We don't expect anybody to stop using social media. We not encourage social media, we encourage good hygiene. But just note that we're able to put this protection in place, even if you still have your passwords in a mug in your.
So this is a gig economy, part-time economy. Everybody's got a side gig that seems like, especially certain areas of the country, it's really popular to try and build that presence on social media. Can that be a big threat for somebody just trying to make a few extra bucks? But maybe it's just a hobby, but they're digitally advertising and their name's out there, their likeness is out there. And now can somebody come in and get kind of backdoor to their personal assets that way? Is that a big deal?
It's yes and no. So, we represent or prevent or protect people who have to have their name out there, influencers, that is their job, right? They can't take it right. Real estate people, being part of the community in the community. And so it's sort of knowing what to pull back. What we find in that scenario with like a side gig or a hustle is it like gets forgotten. And so you still have that dog's Facebook page that you were thinking of starting a kennel 10 years ago, and it's lingering and it has information that you've long forgotten about, and they use that information. We have a service we provide for our clients where we'll do an assessment of their social media and come back to them with like anything we find to be concerning. So the answer is yes, but it shouldn't prevent you from doing the side gig. You should just do it a little more thoughtfully.
This is the third time I've heard Sarah present, and it's just something new every single time. So I do appreciate you, Sarah. Thanks for all the information. One more question before we go. How do we engage with BlackCloak if we'd like?
Well, I am Sarah with an H.Rosen at BlackCloak.io, but just ask Joel and he can put us in touch with you. That's probably
We can hook you up. We'll make the connection. We'll make sure that you get in touch with Sarah, and we'll go from there. I appreciate everybody signing on today. I think this has been the most valuable by far of the webinars that we've done, and we've done some really good ones. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. And we look forward to talking to you soon.
excellent. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.